Welcome. I am Asa Lanham, the Chief Executive Officer of Innovaro, and I'd like to spend a little bit of time with you to give you an overview of Innovaro's innovation methodology. Before we start into this, I want to set a little background. If you have seen our series on innovation for executives, you'll know that we talk about an innovation framework, and in that, we talk about what we refer to as the four I's. Ideation, how do you generate ideas? Incubation, all about how do you mature them? Investigation, how do we make sure they work? In implementation, which is about putting ideas in the pipeline. How do we effectively marry innovation competency with our traditional market competency and really get to commercialization? So let's take a look at a couple of terms that I want to cover before we jump right into the methodology. We look at innovation as a journey. We talk often about an innovation journey where people move from a challenge that they're trying to solve through getting information, through generating ideas, through building business platforms, through getting business concepts, to business models and that. So it's a journey, and sometimes that journey is about new products. Sometimes the journey is about new markets. Sometimes the journey is about organizations or processes. Innovation doesn't just apply in the traditional sense to here's a new product for a market. It can apply to a lot of different things, right? Within our methodology, we use a couple of terms. One of those is lenses, and lenses is a fairly important term. And that lenses basically is a term that we use to describe a reference structure, which is all about fresh perspectives to organize information. And if you think of it in the classic sense, it's looking at the world through a different set of lenses. It's a way to organize your thinking. And the four key lenses that we use, and there are a couple others, but the four key ones are one is orthodoxies. And every organization has orthodoxies, about what they do, how they service, what their financial structure is, all of those kinds of things. There are conventional beliefs about what drives success in your company and your industry. And we regularly see companies and we regularly see products that overturn those orthodoxies, that kind of set them on their head. The most common great failure orthodoxies are the world is flat and man will never fly. Right? So orthodoxies can be good things that help to organize us, or bad things that hold us back. But you got to look at those, understand them, and challenge them. Consumer insights. This is not about market research. This is about establishing that deep empathy to understand and to feel what are a lot of times unvoiced needs of customers. And you get that through observation, you get that through discussion, you get that through understanding. And it's the kind of thing where you see somebody doing something and you say, why do you do that? Right? Why this? And it's, well, I've always done it that way. It's a great difficulty, right? And there's opportunity or there's frustration in there. That's understanding and feeling that. Core competencies, they're really about thinking of companies as a portfolio of competencies. What are we the best at? It could be something as simple as we sell better than anybody else. Maybe we don't build products, but we can sell anything, right? Or we're great at engineering, but we're bad at manufacturing. We're the best in the world at bending sheet metal, right? And what are your strategic assets? What are the things that you own that are strategic for your business, right? Understanding those. And last in that group is discontinuities. And discontinuities, one of the great keys to that for a discontinuity is recognizing it early on, right? And sometimes they're weak changes, but they're things that are underway in our external environments. And you can think of lots of companies that are out of business because they failed to understand those changes in the early days. Whether it's Kodak with cameras, whether it's typewriter companies, whether it's people that used to make just regular phones that now they're smartphones. These things happen. They're discontinuities. They could be changes in the price of gasoline. They happen over time. Maybe it takes them a couple of years to go up a lot, but if you ship a lot of product by truck, it takes a lot of gas. It can really change your cost structure. I want to talk a minute about clustering. And clustering, there's nothing fancy or sophisticated in clustering. What it really says is, how do I take all the data that I get, how do I take the ideas that I generate and cluster them together, put them in groups under some theme to help me better understand them and to better produce a larger set of information and larger products, right? It's one thing, to have a basic capability, but then you add other capabilities on it and they become very, very valuable. So that's the important thing. And then last in this group, I want to talk about crashing. And crashing is a technique that we use to explore and challenge the insights, the things that you've developed from your lenses to really interact through people to generate lots of ideas. To do that, you can think of it as a more organized style of brainstorming, if you will, if that helps any. But think of it as having the background of these perspectives of orthodoxies and insights, and overturning and bringing those together to say, what does this mean? How does this change it? So with that, let's jump into the methodology itself. And we'll look first at ideation, because that's the first of our 4 I's. And our methodology relies on a couple of other concepts that I want to introduce. One of those is called diverge and converge. And diverge says, if you have the same old people thinking the same old way, you're going to get the same old results, which someone defined as insanity, right? Expecting a different result. So diverge says you have to think very broadly. You've got to collect a lot of different perspectives. You've got to collect a lot of different information in order to get as much possible in to challenge and to drive your thinking, right? And again, the lenses that we mentioned are part of what we use during the ideation phase to help to organize that information and give it a reference. And so the first step is to capture a lot of data. And then the second step is to take that data and to begin to cluster it together so it makes sense. You know, it's data about your consumers, it's data about your marketplace. It's all those things, so you've got not just lots of data, but you've actually got information to work with. And then using that information to be able to generate insights. What are the key pieces of knowledge that this lets you know about your marketplace, about your products, about your competitors to do that? And then taking those insights, and this is where we go through the crashing process, and using those in working groups and exchanges to generate lots of ideas. And here it's classic is that you want a lot of ideas. You want a lot of things to come up. They don't have to be beautiful. They don't have to be great things. But the more you get, the better. And then again, coming back thematically and clustering those to try to move from small ideas into larger ideas, to try to move from a flavoring in a beverage to a whole series of flavored beverages, as an example there, right? So that then brings us to the next step, which is really what we look at as incubation. And incubation really is taking these larger ideas and building them into platforms, things that we can bring to the marketplace, that we can roll out over time, that people can begin to consume, that we can actually do, or organizational changes that we can make that have a larger end result, but we start with small pieces of those. It's something that's large that you get in bite-sized pieces, right? And then last but not least is really evolving those into business concepts. And a business concept is something quite simply you can take out and tell someone very simply to put on, to get into their head that they can get their hands around. But you also want to have plenty of backup for that. I think it was one of the great Broadway producers used to have a technique he used. People would recognize him and come up to him and say, hey, I've got this great idea for a Broadway play. And he would give them his business card and say, what I really want you to do is I want you to write your idea down on the back of this card and send it to me along with your contact information. And if I like it, I'll get back to you. And what he basically was saying is if you can't boil that down into something I can get my head around very quickly, how can I actually talk to you? So incubation is about combining ideas into platforms and platforms into business concepts. So then let's move on to investigation. And investigation is again, a major step. And what we really do in here is we get into the design of the business model. And I can tell you, business models, every company has one, at least, of how they do business. They've got a sales cycle. They have people that people call on. They have a way they produce things. They have a way that they work with their suppliers. And what you're doing in the business model is you're saying, okay, so this is my business concept. This is where I want to be. How do I plan for the future and plan back from there to know the steps I need to go through to get there? And what this really does at a top level, it examines where we play. What are we actually in? What's the marketplace? What's the market space that we're in? What are the consumer groups that we're after? What do we provide? I mean, what do we really offer here to the marketplace? Now, tomorrow, next year? How are we going to make these changes in our organizations and those things? How do we make this work? In the case of products, then it looks at how we make money. That's what we're here to do. It's how does this different? How does this better? If we're a very small sale, high margin business right now, and we've got one that can generate a lot of revenue, but the margin goes down, is it more important to maintain high margins on a smaller business or smaller margins on a larger business? Right? That's part of what you have to make decisions about. And you've really got to figure out what makes you different, what makes a competitive advantage. If you think of it as organizational and process changes, What's different from the way we do things? Why is this process going to be any better than the one that we used to have? And then last but not least, how do we supply the market? How do we actually get out and do this? If we're going to make organizational changes, how do we make these organizational changes work and stick and bring all those things? If we're going to bring new products to the market, how do we get the suppliers? And how do we get the distributors? Do we do it all ourselves? Do we have mid-tiers? All of those kinds of things. And in this process, you're actually going to review and create a set of customer value propositions. You're going to look at go-to-market information on channel development. You're going to come back to your competencies and see what you need to flesh out that you don't have. Look at analogies. Look at what's happened in other industries for products that may be similar to yours in terms of the structure, but different in terms of what they are. Got to look at your assumptions and risk, and particularly looking for knowledge gaps. What don't we know that we need to find out? Competitive analysis and that. We also talk about market size triangulation, because one of the key issues is always, well, what's the size of the market, right? And there's total market, and there's available market, and there's target market, and there's various ways of estimating this. And so what we look at is from an internal and an external basis, 3 different ways: a supply-driven side of it, a demand-driven side of it, and a basic bottom-up. And we found that between triangulating between those 3, you can get a pretty good estimate on what your real opportunity size is, both high and low, right? And then certainly you got to take a look at key trends with buying and consumer trends and financial trends. It's not good to be looking at something that's got a lot of investments, got a lot of cost in it, if the financial trends in the marketplace are going the wrong way. So that's really about investigation, which then leads us to the last phase, which is implementation. And I want to caution here, this implementation is about combining innovation and marketplace competencies. It's not meant to replace a product introduction process. It's not meant to replace a product development lifecycle process, or a systems development lifecycle concept, or product lifecycle management, any of those. This is about taking the innovation competency and the marketplace competency and bringing them together. It's about the transition from innovation to commercialization. And we talk about a couple of key things in here. One is test before invest. Let's find out before we make that big commitment as much as we can. And the other one we talk about is fail fast, fail early, and fail cheap. Because often when you get a product right, it's not the first version. We go back and we redo it. And if we spend lots and lots of money to do it the first time, sometimes we're not quite as willing to go back and make those changes when we need to do those, particularly if we got lots and lots of stuff out there. And the key questions we're going to look at here is does anybody want this? Right? And the second one is, can we do it? The third is, can we make money? Right? And in this, the key goals are really about driving learning faster than commitment. How do we know what we're doing before we get there really fast? Second one is keeping it real and focused. And by that, we really mean use real projects. Don't use things that are simply, not going to be real. Get the people who own it involved in making this happen, right? And it's about learning before earning. And in this, we define and run experiments. And there's a number of different kinds between prototypes and simulations and experimental brands and all those kinds of things. But also it's about metrics. It's about what are we going to measure? How are we going to measure it? What are our likely outcomes? It's nice to know what the possible outcomes are before you run it. Is it conclusive, or do we need to do more? Oh, and by the way, if we get the outcome we expect and it's conclusive, what are our next steps? You don't want to be caught there waiting to figure out, well, what do we do next? It looks like this is a great thing. So implementation is all about preparing to make the commitment to really go into production and into distribution and those kinds of things, and getting there in advance. That's the basics of the innovation methodology that we use here at Innovaro and how it maps to the 4 I's. I apologize, this is a small chart with a lot of information. If you'd like to get a bigger version, I suggest that you contact Tanya, and she can tell you how we can give you a bigger one if you'd like to have one. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to speaking with you again.